going to continue to talk about the unaffordable housing situation that we are now in and doesn't seem to be looking like it's going to get any better. Now, I just found this article coming from Market Watch or something like that talking about Lennar Mortgage. This is the company that they're quoting from. I believe the lady's name is Laura Escobar. Anyway, she's in charge of the mortgage financing portion of this Lennar industry. And she's talking about the affordability crunch that is essentially taking place, and that something needs to be done about this. Somehow there needs to be more inventory and more affordable loans out there for people to acquire their home, their dream home, their housing, whatever it is that they believe that they deserve in their life for the American dream or their success to the American dream. I mean, I believe this is kind of a delusion a lot for many people out there, but yet the dream of owning a home is very prevalent within most people out there. When you ask them, would you like to own a home? I think most people would probably answer yes, right? Now, there's only so many homes that are available out there, and there's a ton of people who want them. So there's essentially an unlimited amount of demand for homes, but there is a limited amount of homes that are out there. And yeah, you can go ahead and make the financing easier, lower interest rates, help out with, grants for down payments or something of that nature. But everything you do on that side is increasing the demand. Like lower mortgages, easier mortgages, grants for mortgages, all that stuff increases the demand side of things, which doesn't help out on the pricing, because pricing is really where the affordability or the lack of affordability is starting to occur. I mean, people would make the payments on it if the prices were lower. It doesn't really matter what the interest rate is so long as they can make that monthly payment. But if you have elevated interest rates and an elevated price on the mortgage, the average person is pretty much just priced out of the game. And so you can go ahead and make it easier for them to get a loan. You can make it easier for them to have the down payment. But that doesn't increase the supply. The supply side is really where the problem is faced. We just don't have enough. There's millions of home shortage. I think they're talking like 1.5 million home shortage or something of that nature. I don't know where they come up with this number. But essentially, this is how they are looking at it, is that there's this giant shortage of homes. Well, if you have elevated demand and a shortage of supply, you're going to have elevated prices. So they're thinking, okay, well, let's make this easy. Let's just add more inventory. Let's make it easier for builders. Let's make the regulations less so that we can encourage more building to take place. Well, it's not just a matter of being able to provide new homes. You also have to be able to build those new homes at a certain price. If new homes come onto the market that are elevated in price, that doesn't give you the ability to have affordable homes. It just means you're building more expensive homes. And now when we think about it, it comes down to the materials and the labor cost. There is a lot that goes into the regulations, the land cost, the permitting cost, all that other stuff, like the logistics before the actual construction happens. There's a lot that goes into that. But really, when you think about what it is that costs the most, it's the material and the labor. That's what costs the most going into a building. And if the labor costs are elevated, which they are, limited amount of people who are actually in that game producing those particular products, there is a lot of, say, physical labor that might be available to that. But the actual construction trade of people who are in the business, who write up contracts, who do the actual building itself, not the physical part of it, but all the behind the scenes that make it happen, those people are very limited. And in fact, the small-time builder has taken a huge hit over the last few years as there's been a dramatic slowdown in the building industry. So the small-time builders are not doing well, especially those who operate off of financing, rolling over their old debt into new debt, having to deal with the elevated interest rates. That makes it very difficult for them. Now, the big-time builders out there are quite a few of those, and they are working almost in a new market that is separated from the current housing market. This is something that we had talked about in yesterday's video. And essentially, there's an existing housing market, and then there's the new construction market. And the new construction market has things that are available to it that the existing housing market doesn't necessarily have. And part of that is the builders' incentives. Like, they can offer up incentives to have lower interest rates, or buy downs or whatever it is that they are offering up within this new construction field that isn't necessarily offered in the existing market. So there's like almost two different markets that are happening here at the same time. And when it comes to bringing new inventory in, if you have a ramp up in building, so aside from like, okay, say you find the builders, you have everybody who's ready to go, not that they're going to charge a lot, because if there's a demand for builders, again, there's only a certain amount of them out there. And if there's a huge asking for that, then you're going to find that the price of that particular industry is going to go up in price. But we'll set that aside for just a minute and just look at the building material side of things, especially when it comes to lumber. Because lumber is a very telling sign of where things are going inside of the construction industry. And I have been reporting for months, almost over a year now, that there is curtailment, shortages, depletions. The inventory of lumber has been depleted. It is very low. So if you have a ramp up in building construction need, and there is a demand for new construction taking place, and that demand starts moving into lumber, you're going to find that there is just simply not enough lumber within the system, not to support any kind of significant demand. So what ends up happening is the lumber prices are going to move up. It's going to be inelastic demand, because once you start that project, you are going forward with it. And if you have all of a sudden government action taking place, throwing money at this particular thing, you're going to find that the industry is going to be very inelastic in that demand, meaning that they will look for it and pay for it in any quantity or within the quantity that they need, but from any amount that they need to pay in order to acquire it. That's going to cause the new construction price to be elevated. It's not going to bring it down. And that's so important to understand, because a lot of times it's just the idea behind it. If we bring more inventory to the market, the price will come down. That makes a lot of sense. You can say that outright. Yes, that makes a lot of sense. That's very logical thinking. The only problem with it is how do you bring the new inventory to the market without causing the product itself to go up in price, as the demand for the items that it takes to build that product are very limited in supply? See, a lot of times people say, well, they're just going to make more lumber. Oh, well, they can't just make more lumber. I mean, you can say that. Again, seems right, just fire up the mills and make more lumber, right? But there's a lot that goes into lumber. I mean, it's more than just firing up those mills. Those mills take time in order to acquire the logs, in order to acquire the material, get the process moving, get the stream of material start to flow through that particular mill. It doesn't happen right away. So here you have a ramp up of demand, which can happen very quickly, and you have a limited amount of supply that can get essentially wiped out very quickly. Does not leave a whole lot of room for the current production of lumber to fill in a significant amount of demand. The depletion of mills, the depletion of inventory, the curtailments, this is going to leave it in a very compromised position if there is any pickup in that demand. And I would assume that would take place with the promises coming from not only the administrations, the future administrations, saying that they plan on doing something, right, regardless of how they do it. If they move into doing something that causes more construction of homes, then you are going to find that there is going to be depleted inventory of lumber, and that lumber price is going to go up, and there's no way that you're going to be able to provide cheaper, new, affordable homes if the material cost and labor cost going into those particular products are elevated. It doesn't work like that. We are moved into a position in which that there has been a huge production gap. Like, if you have not produced homes in a significant fashion moving into what is a significant demand, then you have a gap in production that needs to be made up for. And this is the problem that we're facing every day right now, is the depletion of new construction. The less issuance, less starts happening right now. This is that gap in production that needs to be made up. So even if you were to ramp up production, even to meet where we had been, you need to ramp it up even beyond that to make up for the fact that you have not been producing. This is part of the bullwhip effect. Understanding the bullwhip effect is very important within this housing industry, because it's not going to provide the ability to have those affordable homes. You're going to have a lot of effort put into it. You're going to have a lot of people who are talking about how it is that something needs to be done. But what it is that's being done isn't necessarily going to be the right move, considering what it is that needs to be done to acquire the dream goal of having new inventory isn't exactly going to have something that is going to be cheaper, or the cheaper ability to do it. And I get all that right? So essentially, the idea of bringing in inventory to lower the housing price isn't going to work if the cost of building the house goes up, right? That's essentially what it comes down to. Okay, guys, I'm going to give this a fairly quick video. We're going to be like maybe another 10 minutes here, and then I got to jet out. Okay. Kirk, I concur on that principle. Got to study to know if we can or cannot control what's in question. You know, I think the only thing that you can control is the way that you react, the way that you interpret, the meaning that you give it, and how it is that you deal with that information. That is the only thing that you control. Everything else is out of control, right? In fact, control is an illusion. Control is an illusion no matter what it is. No, like, think about it in the sense that you're driving your car, right? You're driving your car, you're doing 55 miles an hour down the highway, you've driven this car hundreds of times, it's reacted and done exactly how it is that you had expected it to perform, with no deviation to it whatsoever. You know exactly what's going on with this vehicle, you know how to maneuver it, you know what to do with everything about it. It's as if the, unconscious effort, right? You got this. And then you blow a tire at 55 miles an hour and now you're sliding all over the highway, right? Control was an illusion the entire time. You never once ever had control. Not once, right? Because at any given moment, that tire could have gone out and you would have been losing control at that moment. You would have been sliding all over the highway. It's very important to understand that control is an illusion. You think you have it, but you don't. Never have you ever. Now, what you do have control over is the meaning that you give things, the way that you react to them, right? That's the only thing that you actually have control over, because you can get mad about it. You can get, you can get sorry about it. You can feel, resentful. You can understand it for what it is and say, okay, I need to, internalize this, accept it for what it is, and then let it go so I can move on with my life. There's all kinds of ways that you can deal with the fact that something has happened. That's the only way that you can control anything, is by your reaction to it. Right? But everything else is out of control. All right. Great insight, Simon. Well, thank you, Benny. I appreciate that, man. All right. Government will subsidize prices for the newly built home like everything else. CT, but that won't work. See, that won't work. Let's subsidize the home, all right? So what does that mean, right? We are going to throw, if you throw effort at demand, right? So you're going to subsidize which part of it, the building of the home or the financing of the home, which or maybe both. Right? Maybe you're going to do both of them. But let's think about one or the other. It doesn't really matter which way it goes, because something similar is going to take place. If you throw subsidies at, like, the purchasing of a home, right? The government subsidizes low-income families in order to acquire a home. That increases the demand, right? So now you have supply-demand issues with higher demand to it. What ends up happening? Higher prices. Okay, well, maybe we won't do that. Let's just go over to the inventory side and let's just start ramping up production of inventory. So now, again, we are sitting in a position in which that the very material that you would need in order to build more homes, right? You subsidize builders in order to incentivize them to do new construction, lower the regulations, whatever. You start ramping up the construction industry with new home production. What you are going to find is the material that goes into that particular item is very limited in supply. I've been reporting on it. This is something that is going to impact the housing market if you have all of a sudden a bunch of inelastic demand that is starting to move into that industry. Government subsidizes the builders, and what you are going to find is that the lumber production was not enough to meet an increase in builder demand, especially if it's anything significant. A significant move coming from government would be, I would think, quite a dramatic move. And if you have that much movement going into an industry that is limited in supply, then you're going to find the prices moving up. And what did we find back during the COVID is that lumber prices can exceed $1,500 per thousand. which is going to be a significant input cost going into the new construction. So if you have government subsidizing the building of new homes when you do not have a significant amount of inventory to supply into that demand, then you are going to find the prices moving up again. I just don't see how it is that there is any government action that can take place that will actually make homes affordable. I don't believe that can be possible. Not at this point. All right, moving on. Brody says, thank you. Thank you. Got dishes up in the house. Thank you for being here, mamas. All right. Subsidies equal lower prices like food. I just don't agree with that, CT. I think it's going to be quite the opposite. All right. Don't countries with supposedly cheaper labor have subsidies to make labor cheaper? I think both China and India do this. Yeah, they sure do. Alright, hey Brody, hey dishes, hey everyone. Alright, Simon is describing the housing market. Hope he knows it's the same in every market. Everything is waiting on consumer and the consumer is broke. Yeah, and that's pretty interesting to think about, considering that I'm reading articles talking about all this money sitting on the sidelines. Right? I mean, here it is that there's money market accounts and U.S. like this is the article that I was reading. I wish I had it in front of me so I could quote from it. But it was basically talking, I don't know how many people know what a Treasury Direct account is, right? But basically, if you want to buy Treasury bonds, you have an account with the U.S. government called the Treasury Direct. You don't actually get the paper bond, like you don't get paper in your hand. You get an account that shows how much bond activity that you have taken place, or how, what bonds you have purchased, all that. It's basically in a Treasury Direct account. That's the way it's done. Now, prior to COVID, prior to the Federal Reserve raising interest rates so significantly, there was very few people who actually had one of these Treasury accounts, one of these Treasury Direct accounts. I think the article was saying it was less than 1 million people. But then after interest rates had moved up significantly and people wanted to take advantage of the idea of getting a return on their capital investment in the safe and liquid asset of the U.S. Treasuries, that Treasury Direct account shot up to like 40 million account, or not 40, 4 million accounts or so. Like a whole bunch of people jumped into this game. Now, granted, that's not exactly a whole lot of people considering how many people live in the United States, but it is a significant move that went from less than 1 million people to over 4 times that many now participating within this particular market, the Treasury accounts. So what the article was trying to say is like, well, if there's like, all this people and all this money that had moved into the Treasury market to try and take advantage of those yields, if the yields start to drop, are they going to pull that money back out? And then what would they do with it? Are they going to move it into the stock market, move it into real estate, move it into gold and Bitcoin? There's got to be a place that they need to go with this. And if they're not getting the return on the treasuries, then they need to find a place to go. And this is where I think that a lot of people are misunderstanding where that money sits in the sidelines. Like a lot of times they think, okay, well, it's sitting like in a savings account or something of that nature. And there could be some in there, but really it's the money market accounts. It's the capital positions that they have allocated that money to, right? That can very well find itself out of those accounts and into cash and then into the economy itself as people start to spend that money, whether they need to or if they're taking a position inside of something that they find is a better buying opportunity other than the U.S. government debt. But that's something that is like, I think is something to watch. A lot of times we find, articles or people out there saying, oh yeah, the U.S. Treasury is dead. Everybody's getting out of the dollar. Just look at all these nations who are dumping U.S. Treasuries. I think before you just fall into this narrative, just go and do a little research on it and take a look at the foreign holdings of U.S. Treasury debt. Like foreign buyers of U.S. government bonds is now higher than it has ever been. There's more foreign holdings of U.S. government debt now than ever, right? I mean, could they be getting out of it? Sure, they could be getting out of the U.S. debt, considering that there is so much U.S. debt that has been issued. Granted, there could probably be more foreign holdings of U.S. debt than there is now, but even still, with all the government spending and all the creation of all this debt, there's still now more foreign holdings of U.S. government debt than in any time in history. So this is, I mean, again, to consider where this money could come from, this sideline money. Okay? If you have capital allocated into these particular assets, at any given time, these liquidable assets like U.S. Treasuries can then start flowing right into the economy. So who knows what can happen. What are we into this? 20 minutes. We got 200 people watching. What time is it? All right, guys. I'm going to give it like maybe another 5 minutes here. Do you have any other questions, comments, or anything you want to bring up? All right. You have to be under the average income in that country. All right. Too many bricks, bros. No. The bricks is a bunch of noise that I just don't see. I mean, I'm not saying it's impossible for the BRICS to take over as far as what the world reserve currency is doing today, or having a new reserve currency through issuance through the BRICS. It's best to understand it that there are some economic forces out there that are just really, they need to be overcome before you can find that one of these nations or even a group of nations are going to be able to compete against the dollar. And the number one part is that they have to have a currency. They have to have a currency that is available, that is prevalent, that is trusted. And this is very difficult to do because a lot of people won't even trust the US dollar, but yet here it still exists. So if people don't even trust the US dollar, but yet it can maintain the world reserve currency status, how is it people are like, this is the most trustworthy currency because it's the United States. I mean, are you going to trust China? Are you going to trust India? Are you going to trust Brazil? I mean, are you going to trust any one of these nations more than you're going to trust the United States? And I'm asking even the entire globe this question, even the BRICS nations themselves. Are they going to trust their buddy over there, like China, more than they trust the United States government debt? When it comes to sanctions, I understand they can't trust that part of it, but the idea that it's going to be paid back, period, that part, right? Regardless of everything else. Does China promise to pay back more significant and trustworthy than the United States promised to pay back? I mean, really, honestly, the United States holds that trust. They are guaranteed to pay. Zero chance of default. Zero chance of default on a U.S. Treasury because they have the printing press to pay it, right? So no guarantee that it'll have a purchasing power, but there's always a guarantee that it'll be paid. Right now, China is suffering through defaults. Corporations are defaulting like mad over there. They are running through a deflationary scenario. You would trust the Chinese government debt over the U.S. government? Probably not. Some people might, but most people probably won't. So the BRICS nations don't have a chance to compete against what the dollar is doing if they plan on being the issuer of safe and liquid assets like U.S. Treasuries. So people say, no, they're going to be using gold, man. Gold. Really? Gold? Okay, well, if gold was an efficient way of doing transactions for the reserve currency, then that's what would be used today. The problem with it is that there was a limited amount of transactions that gold can do. And since most people at the time, when the fiat currency of the dollar was being used as a world reserve currency, they were under the impression that they could always exchange a certain amount of dollars for a fixed amount of gold. And since they were under that impression, they went ahead and used it. They may not even wanted to do it. They were like, man, I don't know if I can trust these dollars, but I want to do the transactions. I want to work. I want to eat. I want those products. I want to be able to work, be active within the economy. And if there's a limited amount of currency out there, then you can't be active within the economy. But if there's an unlimited amount of currency and unlimited a chance of being able to acquire debt to get the currency to do the transaction, then people are essentially going to go with that. And that's exactly what they did. And so gold became very difficult to then be used as a world reserve currency because it was very limited on how many transactions it could provide. But the fiat currency, unlimited amount of transactions. So people were like, okay, let's do it. Let's, use the dollar. I don't like the idea behind it. Probably can't trust it. One day you're probably going to end up screwing us. And that's exactly what ended up happening. But now we're sitting in a position in which that people have no other choice. You can't go back to gold. You'll be limiting the amount of transactions. The most industrious person out there will hoard all the gold for themselves, making a depressionary effect upon the rest of the economies out there. So it just won't happen that way. Again, if you study Gresham's law, Triffin's dilemma, Cantillon effect, this stuff would be very clear. And it would be like, okay, so if the BRICS nations are going to take over, one, they have to be able to provide a safe and liquid asset to the level that the United States is doing, and not a single one of those nations wants to go into that much deficit spending, meaning that they export money and import stuff. That's Triffin's dilemma. There's the world reserve currency issuer has to be in a deficit trade position. None of the BRICS nations want to do that. They all want to be the producer savers. All righty, guys, this was a lot of fun. Thank you very much for being here. All right. Triffin's paradox or dilemma. I think it's, either way. All right, Mark Holman, U.S. policy transcends administrations. It seems like I'm assets right now. There are no downside risks. I don't know. There's always downside risk. Any chance Microsoft will add BTC to their balance sheet? I don't know. All right. So we're cooked. Well, I mean, no, we're not cooked. How much time we got? We got a few more minutes here. All right. No, we're not cooked. I think the general idea of what it is that people would have needed to do in their life in order to acquire the things that they need to live out like what it is that is the American dream, or the idea of the American dream, I think that is cooked. I think that idea is long gone, and that it's not going to be possible anymore. Many people want their 9-to-5 job to be able to provide them with everything that they need in their life. That doesn't work either. Even a good job sucks. So knowing this is the case, just knowing that your 9-to-5 job is not enough, that the career path that you have taken with the student loan debts is not enough. It's not going to do it. It should. We believe it should. We think it should. I mean, we can argue about how it should. We can try and vote politicians in who say, yeah, we should make it that way. But it's not feasible anymore. It's not even, if you understand the economics of it, it's not going to go that way without a lot of pain and misery to the people in order to have their 9-to-5 job being able to cut it anymore. So understand it, that it just doesn't work like that anymore. But that's okay, because there's other things that we can do. And now, yes, it doesn't feel good to have to work beyond our 9-to-5 jobs, but this is survival. This isn't like, it isn't fair. You're right. It's not fair. It's not fair that we have to work 9-to-5 and then go out and try and do side hustles, try and figure out some other job that we need to do. You're right. That part is not fair, but it's survival of the wild here. And you can't change the way that it's done. Like, you can try and vote people in and say, hey, we're going to make housing affordable, but then have no real way of doing it, right? You can say, man, I voted for you to give housing affordable. How come you can't do it? And they're like, I don't know. We did everything we could, not realizing that the Cantillon effect was never going to allow them to do it. But if you don't understand it to begin with, then you might believe that these actions could work, that there is a hope and dream possible for it, right? All right, let me read this super chat, and then I got to go. Oh, Lumberjack Landlord, thank you so much, man, for the $5. I really appreciate you. On the earlier comment, it's not the same in every market, like he said. You buy steak with a 3.5% down payment, rent 3.5%, lumber 3.5%, houses you can. Yeah. You can't buy a steak with the 3.5% down payment, or can you? Rent 3.5%, lumber 3.5%, houses you can. Yeah, I think I get you there, lumber. Like, when it comes to purchasing other things, right, it's not the same as being able to take out a loan for that item. Right, so that particular item that you were able to get a loan for has a different price tag attached to it than as opposed to if you couldn't get a loan for it. Like, if you couldn't get loans, if you couldn't get mortgage loans at all, can you imagine how many houses would actually be built Zero. Like nobody would build a house knowing that there was nobody out there who could really have the cash in hand to buy one, right? And then the only people who would actually have the cash would be the ultra rich. So if you could imagine like just zapping all mortgages away right now, saying no, you can't even get one, the housing market would completely collapse under the idea that nobody would be building them. You would have no more inventory coming to the market. The only people who would actually build them were the people who had the physical ability to do it. And that's it. Everybody else would be screwed, except for the handful of people who are rich who had the cash. Thank you for this super chat. Meaning with houses, you can use leverage so it's not the same. Yeah, and I think that's what I was trying to clarify a bit on that. Leverage is beautiful when it's calculated well. Yeah. Houses would be much cheaper because they will be built by people's workmanship. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know anybody who can. I know one guy who is building a house on his own, like piecing every piece together by himself. Maybe has a couple of people helping him out, but for the most part, he's building a fairly decent sized house too, and it's all by himself, and it's taken him a while. Like, I mean, he's been working on this thing for a couple of years now. And so this isn't something that is easily done. People say, oh man, anybody with the skills can do it. Very few people, very few, who not only have the ambition, but the ability. The ability and the ambition, right? Those are very difficult for those things to find. Alrighty guys, I would love to hang out because I think this is a great topic. We've been covering it for a couple of days, and I think it's going to become a very big, widely debated, common narrative within the mainstream media when it comes to what ends up happening here over the next couple of years when trying to deal with this housing market. The idea of bringing inventory to the market is a very difficult one, and the idea of bringing affordability to the housing market is a very difficult one without causing the housing prices to go up. Right? It's easy to say, but it's a lot harder to deliver on. Okay, Uneducated Economist, you guys are awesome. Thank you for being here. Go hit that like button. You let me know.